the challenges of traditional software testing, and how does the TrustInSoft Analyzer address?
Yeah, so there are several challenges with traditional software testing. One of them is the time pressure issue and the resource issue. Everyone is trying to do more with less these days and is under tremendous pressure to ship now or ship sooner. But there's also the quality element. And for these types of industries where quality impacts the mission critical, sometimes even safety issues, that balance can be difficult to strike. When do you know that you're done? There is no other way to get an active confirmation of the fact that there are no bugs. You'll run your tests, you'll run other analyzers, and you'll try to do it as exhaustively as possible, but then you have to make a call to say, are we finished, right? So there's the time pressure element. There's also the complexity of it all. Oftentimes in IoT and embedded devices in particular, testing isn't able to even begin until the device is available for those developers to test on. So it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem. The TrustInSoft Analyzer does not run or require the presence of hardware, even if it's special embedded devices. We, through our target awareness and target emulation, can run in software on a generic PC well before a demo board is available. So we're helping developers to ship left, which many industries and organizations have initiatives around. So it's a goal of theirs to do this kind of testing sooner because of the time pressure I mentioned earlier, and also because it's typically cheaper to address issues sooner rather than later, particularly in these embedded projects. Um, the other challenge is the repeatability of all of this. This type of analysis has long been associated with mathematicians and PhDs and requires an expert level of guidance to run an analysis like this. TrustInSoft has packaged all that expertise and now allows anyone to run this analyzer. In fact, we can be integrated in CI/CD pipelines, and we are integrated in industries around the world as part of their automated build processes, so that we can again help them with speed while improving and increasing the coverage that they're able to get with their tests. And that would be the final thing that I would mention with respect to that question, which is the tests themselves. There's often a large and unending number of tests in the form of unit tests and other functional tests that have to be written and maintained alongside a code base. With TrustInSoft's ability to generalize inputs and to leverage formal methods, we actually allow and can facilitate fewer tests overall, while improving the efficacy of those and the coverage as well. So lots of efficiencies in many different areas.
I see. This might be going backwards in the conversation a little bit, but I was just wondering if you could go through like how an engineer who's writing code would then use your analyzer while they're, I mean, is this in real time as they're coding, or is it like during compile time or something?
Great question. Yeah, it's not exactly in real time as they're coding. So we do leverage abstract interpretation. We don't compile the code. We don't depend on a compilation of the code, but it needs to be in a state where essentially that's possible. So we generally need at least a module. So we can break code up. Practically speaking, oftentimes we're not testing one complete project all in one go. It's a modular approach, and especially with distributed development teams all over the world working on many components of one package, let's say, they're able to independently test on their modules and individual components, but we need those to be relatively complete. So it's not quite real time, and it typically is at compile time, although it doesn't depend on compilation.
What languages does the TrustInSoft Analyzer work on?
Well, we support today C and C++, which the majority of our customers in the embedded and IoT space are leveraging for this type of application.
In software, meeting certain certifications and standards are important. How does TrustInSoft approach this?
Yes, thank you. TrustInSoft recently has been qualified for ISO 26262 as a tool that can help support a customer who is going for or requires that certification. That's just one of many standards which we're used to assisting customers with and providing valuable insights via the analyzer.
I see. Speaking of quickly, will the TrustInSoft Analyzer save engineers time and cost during development?
Yes, both. Um, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but the fact that we're leveraging formal methods and this abstract interpretation technique leads to something known as input generalization oftentimes. So the analyzer provides an easy on-ramp You can run it at what's known as a level 1 analysis, which doesn't require you to modify any of your tests or your code. You can just literally run it through the analyzer, and it will apply its own assertions to give you detections and to tell you even more than the tests themselves will be able to tell you. Where many customers ultimately want to get to, though, is what's known as at least level 2, which involves that abstract interpretation and input generalization. And when you do that, you're testing many possible inputs, all possible inputs, let's say for a string or an integer. Where a unit test, let's say, will test a few concrete values, the level 2 TrustInSoft generalized input version of that test will test all possible integer values, all possible string characters, and so forth. But it will do it in a way that is superior to something like fuzzing, let's say, which we often get compared to, and we can work with as well. But unlike fuzzing or like a brute force kind of an approach, the application of formal methods allows us to test that exhaustively without having to take so much time or even so many compute resources as it otherwise would to literally incrementally go through those things one by one by one. So you'll see a TrustInSoft analysis, for instance, on the order of minutes that will represent billions or trillions of discrete separate tests. And when it comes to time savings, it's extreme. It can be a lot. Not only are we saving time, but we're increasing the test coverage in that way, because oftentimes nobody would have set out to try all possible values. They would have known ahead of time that there's not time, there's not that much time, there's not that much resources in order to practically do that. But TrustInSoft has not only made that possible, but it's made it efficient.
I see. So I take it that the Trust and Self Analyzer would probably catch more bugs than anybody else would catch on their own. Um,
Absolutely, that is the goal. I'll couch that by saying that our focus is exclusively on undefined behavior detection. So the bugs that we do find are those most critical ones that you're certainly going to want to fix. They're going to represent attack surface area that would be untenable to ship. Which is the other thing our customers appreciate. Many analyzers on the market will produce a report with lots of different bugs in them. Um, which then causes a triage type of an effort on the customer or the user side, where you have to go and look and say, well, is this worth fixing? How serious do we think it is? And that itself can be a drain on developer time that many organizations simply just don't want to go through. With the TrustInSoft Analyzer, when there's a detection, not only is it thorough, but it's going to tell you about things that are worth fixing, that are going to certainly warrant someone's attention. And that's, again, another way in which we can save some time and some money by avoiding that triage process and providing just a quality list.
okay. Do you just if you're catching all these bugs and things like that, so you're stopping hackers from finding exploits in any sort of software that's being written, right? Do you have any? Yeah, I'm just curious. Do you have any stories how about you guys actually defeating a hacker, like hacking attempts? And any product. You don't have to mention the company that used the software.
Sure. Yes, definitely. It's not so much the case that we're defeating hackers actively because our customers are leveraging TrustInSoft. We're finding issues that prevent hackers from ever coming along and doing what they do. So in that way, we're heading them off. And there are numerous examples of this. For instance, we ran the TrustInSoft Analyzer against the Wireshark code base, which is a significant code base, is very mature, it's been around for a long time. And I recall going into that exercise, I wasn't quite sure we were going to find all that much. Like I said, Wireshark's been open source and well available for many years. However, we ran the analyzer on that 5+ million lines of code and produced 13 detections, one of which was an extremely critical vulnerability that was immediately fixed by the team. And so that's one story that I always like to talk about, because A, it's open source, but also B, it's a production size, very mature code base where you might not have expected there to still be those types of vulnerabilities. But we see it all the time. Just yesterday, there was a new CVE in Chromium that represented buffer overflow. That is the nature and the type of thing that the TrustInSoft Analyzer detects. Um, so it's these types of issues, serious as they are also unfortunately very common. They're easy mistakes for developers to make, and it's extremely difficult to root them out because of the fact that they don't always manifest. Typically it requires specific conditions, certain inputs and things to suss out these behaviors. And but that's why formal methods and the TrustInSoft Analyzer's unique approach is so powerful at identifying this extremely critical class of vulnerabilities, because it will find them all, and it will tell you when it says there are none, that's active confirmation. That means there are none. That doesn't just mean next week maybe there'll be a TrustInSoft update with better detections or other detections, and new things will be detected. No, when you run the analyzer and it tells you no undefined behaviors found, that's mathematical proof, guarantee of the absence of those, unless or until that code changes. And so many of our customers will use that as a foundation. We often use the term root of trust. So with respect to talking about hackers and attack surfaces and security, many of our customers will start at the core of their root of trust within their devices and validate that code with the TrustInSoft Analyzer, and then work their way up that stack. It's a very practical, common approach that we see, and there are many stories where we find issues practically all the time.
That is really cool. I have to say, hey, what? Just I've never heard this phrase before. What's an attack surface?
Oh yeah, attack surface is just a term that refers to the ability or the likelihood that an attacker or that a hacker could hack your system. The more uncertainty that it has, and the greater number of lines of code and different types of systems that are involved in the operation of it. So it's this umbrella term for all of those different things. The more complex and the larger your software system is, it could be said that the attack surface is potentially large. What's exposed out there that a hacker could potentially interface with to possibly then exploit, right? And by locking things down, making things less available, ensuring that only systems that are part of like a distributed system, let's say, are allowed to talk to one another and not to the general public internet. All of those things are related, and necessary to do what we would say is reduce that attack surface. And when I reference it in the TrustInSoft sense, what I'm referring to is the fact that if you could guarantee that any of your code, let alone all of your code, right, more ideally, but let's just say any of your code is free of undefined behaviors, that means that you're guaranteeing that there is no possibility of a buffer overflow, no possibility of a use after free. There's many hundreds of undefined behaviors, but we don't tend to call them undefined behaviors in the CVEs. They're always integer overflow, buffer overflows, that type of thing. Those are the undefined behaviors that we're talking about. And so by locking your code down and being assured, knowing for certain that those are not in your code, there's no path then for an attacker or a hacker to achieve an exploit via any of those methods. So that's why we say we're helping customers to reduce their attack surface, because that security is assured.
I've heard so many stories about cars and pretty much everything being hacked, and I'm glad there's like you guys are doing what you're doing. How can a developer or an engineer choose the best tools for them?
That's a great question, a very loaded question. Developers, we take a great pride in our tool chains and in the stacks that we have come to know and love and work in every day. It's a very personal thing oftentimes, and I would say that it's fair to say that no two are going to be the same, even within the same organization. Certainly there are things that are mandated and tools that are required and so forth, but I think most developers, we have our preferred ways of working, right on down to the color scheme that we like to see in our IDEs and things like that. The nice thing about TrustInSoft is, in that respect, is that it's a very modular tool. So I often get asked, for instance, we'll do a demo, let's say, and we'll show a report to somebody, and they're already thinking about how they want to change that report, or they want to see the data some other way, right? Because we always want to put our own spin on it, or we have our own other processes and our own tooling that needs different formats, or the raw data, let's say. That's all available with TrustInSoft. So the modularity of the tool, the fact that we can run on the CLI or with our very good UI, and we don't force any particular method over another onto a developer for how we're to operate there. They can leverage just the analyzer and leverage the raw output for an auditor. Or I saw a customer the other day sending it into Splunk for long-term reporting. There's a great amount of flexibility in the results and the output of the tool that allow you to essentially work it into your own workflow without being forced to make any dramatic changes there. And that's often refreshing for those developers who are like, nope, you're never going to take this away from me, right? My IDE, my CLI, my VI, whatever it is, that's fine.
So, all
Yeah.
right, Jason, thank you for your time, and thanks for telling us all about the Trust and Self Analyzer. Um, I learned quite a bit about it. I look forward to actually giving it a shot.